Hello, Kailua Keiki. Here we have 2 water bucks. Now, you may be saying 2, I only see 1. But right there is a normal colored water buck. See it there hiding against the rock? But it isn't very obvious, is it? And over here, we have an albino water buck. Now, albino water bucks are very, very rare. And because they're so rare, they often are well sought after by people. And the other thing about them is that they become even rarer because if you were an animal hunting, you might not see that one, but you would see that one.
Though I would be such bad aim that the other one would be more endangered because if I was trying to hit him, I'd keep missing, shooting over them, or completely missing. So the other ones would be more endangered because I have such bad aim.
So if you have a bad hunter around, it may be okay to be an albino. But in general, it's not very safe to be an albino. But one thing about albinos is that they're really pretty. So what albinos have to learn is to be very careful. They have to be able to look and smell very well in order to survive, because they have to make sure that they're blended in as much as they can, even though they're white. They may have to stay in the middle of the herd and all of that. So even though they're beautiful and special, they also have to learn to do really different things and do things differently with the talents that God gave them of being beautiful. So today's story, we're going to talk about Esther. And Esther was a very, very beautiful girl who had some, I guess, luckiness because she was so beautiful she became queen. But she also had some challenges because since she was queen, she had extra responsibility. But in the story, and the reason Esther is such a hero is because she said, God, if you made me be in this position, then I'm going to do what is right. And so she used her talents for good. And that's what we all need to do. So like this albino water buck has to be very careful, but that means that he can help the rest of the herd stay out of danger because he's so used to being careful.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard for me to do use my talents of aiming for bad, such as killing a water buck, because from the amount of times I've missed, the herd would be long gone by the time I'd finally actually hit where one used to be.
All right, so that's true. The talent of aiming wasn't there. Now we'll move on. So in today's story, we're going to talk about an orphan named Esther. This right here is Esther. And Esther was a beautiful girl. But she didn't have a mom and dad, so her much older cousin Mordecai adopted her, and she lived with him. And she was very happy to be with him. And he named her Esther because that meant star. And he said, you are just like a star, because her name had been Hadassah before. So Esther lived happily with her uncle for several years. But then something interesting and not expected happened. As it turned out, the king of the country decided that he wanted to find himself a wife. He kind of had a little fight with his old wife, and she had left, and he said, I need a new queen. And so his guards here said, hey, we have an idea. We'll go through all the land and find the most beautiful women and bring them to you, and you can choose which one you want to be your queen. The king said, hey, sounds good to me. Sounds like fun. So the guards took off and went looking for women. So one of the places that the guard went was to the home of Esther. And Esther had grown into a very beautiful woman. And the guy said, "Oh, I think the king might like you. I'm going to take you." And that's what he did. And after many months of getting ready, Queen Esther went before the king. And the king was astounded. He said, "Oh my, that's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." And he said, "I know. I am going to make you my queen." And he put a crown on her. Esther and the king got married. And if this was a fairy tale, they would have lived happily ever after. But this wasn't exactly a fairy tale because there were other people involved. There was a man named Haman. And Haman was the king's special assistant. And the king asked him to do all kinds of things. And Haman was a very proud man. And Haman wanted everyone to bow down to him. And so everybody did because they were scared of Haman, except one person. Esther's cousin Mordecai. And that made Haman very angry. And he was not at all happy with Mordecai. Now, Mordecai's job was to sit at the king's gate and probably deliver messages or something like that. But one day while he was sitting there, it so happened that there was two kind of bad guys. And they were plotting about how to kill the king. And they were saying, we're going to do this and that and the other. And Mordecai heard them. And they didn't realize that Mordecai had a connection inside the palace. So Mordecai, he went and told his cousin, Queen Esther, what had happened and about the plot. And she said, "Oh my, I don't want my husband killed." So Esther went to the palace and told the king all about the plot. And the king sent his guards and had those guys arrested, and he was just fine. And they recorded that Mordecai was the one who had helped to save the king. So the king thought, wow, Mordecai is a really great guy. Haman was not so excited about Mordecai, and he continued to try to think of a good plot to get rid of him. And then he came up with the perfect plan. He found out that Mordecai was a Jew, and he said, "I'll just get rid of all the Jews. We don't need any Jews around our place anyway." This, of course, was not a nice thing at all, but that's what Mordecai decided to do. And you know what? Haman got the king to sign something saying it was okay to kill all the Jews. Do, do, do.
You have a low battery.
After the law that Haman wrote came out, Mordecai went to see Esther and he said, "Esther, we have this problem." And Esther said, "What is it, uncle? What is it?" And her uncle Mordecai said, "Haman has made a law that says all of us will be killed. All Jews are going to be killed. It's terrible. Esther, you've got to do something about it. You've got to talk to the king." And Esther said, "Well, uncle, I can't." And he said, "What do you mean you can't?" She said, "There's a law. And the law says that if anyone goes to see the king without the permission, even if it's the queen, I will be dead unless he makes a special favor and puts out his scepter to me." And Mordecai said, "Esther, you've got to do this." And she's like, "I'm going to get killed." And he's like, "But if you don't, all of us are going to get killed. Don't you think that maybe God put you here just for this reason? Maybe that's why God made you so beautiful, Esther, so that you could save your people. Aren't you willing to do that? You're a Jew too. You really should be dead too. Of course, the king doesn't know. And Esther said, okay, you're right, Uncle. Maybe this is what God wants me to do. I will do it. I will do it, but you guys have to pray, okay? If I die, I die, but please pray for me before I do it. All of you have to pray for me. And he said, okay, that sounds like a plan. So all over town, groups of Jews got together and they prayed for Esther that she could be successful and not be killed by the king. And Esther went to see the king after all those prayers. She was so scared, but she went to see him and she said, "Oh, king." And you know what he did? He put out his golden scepter to her. And so she knew she'd be okay. And he said, "My beautiful queen, what is it that you want?" And she said, "My request is that you come to dinner with me and that you bring Haman as well." So the king and Haman and Esther all had a meal that night, and it was great. And the king was loving it. And he liked the food, and he was like, "Esther's so beautiful." And Haman was like, "Wow, I'm so special. I got invited to this." And then the king said, "Really, Esther, what is it that you want?" She said, "Oh, nothing, just that you come back tomorrow night." And he said, "Okay, I'll do that. And Haman must come with you." And Haman's like, "Oh, yeah, that sounds good to me." But on his way home, Haman had something that didn't make him so happy. It was that Mordecai. He just stood there when Haman walked by and didn't bow. "Rrrr," Haman said. He went home, and Haman talked to his wife, and he said, that Mordecai, he makes me so mad. He don't bow to me." And his wife said, "Just tell the king to kill him. No big deal. The king likes you. After all, you're going out with just the king and Esther. That's like the biggest privilege of all. No one's going to say no to you." And Haman's like, "Yeah, I'll just get him ahead of time. I know I'm going to kill everyone later, but Mordecai, he needs extra special early killing." So Haman went to the king, and the king said, "Oh, hey, Haman." And before Haman could ask about Mordecai, the king said, "Hey, Haman, what do you think could be done for the man that I want to honor?" And Haman said, who would the king more like to honor than me? Of course it's me. Why else would he be inviting me along on all these other things? So Haman said, "I know what you should do. You should have them sit on the royal horse with the royal saddle and have someone run before them and say, 'This is what is done for the one that the king delights to honor.'" And the king said, "Oh, good idea. Go do that for Mordecai." And Haman said, "What?" He didn't understand. But what he didn't know is that the king had read about how Mordecai had saved him before and realized that he hadn't done anything nice for him. So he decided to do that for Mordecai. And Haman was so upset. But Haman realized that he had to do it. After all, this was the king's command. So he took Mordecai, and he put him on a horse with the crowns on it, on the saddle thing, and he took Mordecai running all over the place and said, "This is what will be done for the man that the king delights to honor." And it was terrible. And Haman was like, "Oh, I hate this." And the only thing he had to look forward to was dinner that night with Queen Esther. So that night Haman came all hot and sweaty to the queen's house to eat dinner. And he tried to get in a better mood, but he wasn't feeling too good after his run all day in front of Mordecai. But he thought, well, this is good. I'm going to be with the queen. But it didn't go well for him, because the king, he said, "Esther, dear, what is it that you really want me to do?" And Esther said, "Oh, king, here's the thing. My people are going to be killed and I with them. Somebody's trying to kill all of us. It's terrible. I don't know what to do. I need you to help me." And the king said, "Who would do such a thing?" And Esther said, "Haman. Haman wrote the edict. He's trying to kill everybody." And the king was like, "Oh my goodness. Haman, how could you?" And Haman was like, "Uh-oh, I'm in trouble now." And the king was so upset with Haman that he told his guards to take him away and kill him. And Haman was taken away. So Haman was hung by the neck. Why? Because the person that was trying to hit him with the catapult couldn't hit him. You're missing. You keep missing.
Forget it, just hang him.
And the queen and the king called Mordecai in, and they said, "Why don't you take Haman's place? You can help us out now." And they decided to make a new law that said people shouldn't attack the Jews. We'll make sure the Jews can defend themselves from the people. And that's exactly what happened. And hardly anyone attacked anyway, because people realized that probably wasn't a good idea to attack people that were related to the king. And so the story had a happy ending after all. But, you know, going back to the beginning in our nature story, Esther was beautiful. And she was different because she was so beautiful. But she was able to use that talent that God gave her for the good of her people. And I hope that all of you use the talents that God gives you for good. Even though Esther was beautiful on the outside, what really made her special was that she was brave and kind enough to save all of her people. It was what was on the inside, how she acted, that was the most important. So our memory verse today is, "Do not let your beauty be that outward adorning, but let it be the hidden person of the heart." That means your beauty should be how you act and what you do, not how you look on the outside. And Esther looked good on the outside, but what was really important is what was in her heart. Thank you so much. Have a great week. Bye-bye.